Hey guys, Adam here from Northwest Rally Sports. Tonight we're going to show you how to install our non-AVCS oil line kit. Our kit can be installed utilizing general hand tools. The kit comes with one high-flow oil line, two 10mm copper washers, two 12mm copper washers, and one high-flow 10mm banjo bolt. Also recommended for the install would be blue thread locker and a number 6 hose clamp for your turbo coolant feed line. First thing you need to do is remove your hood prop and all of your intake components. Normally there's two 12mm bolts holding this in. This particular customer's vehicle doesn't have those bolts. We'll replace them when we put it all back together. Get a 12 down here and a 12 way down here. That's what the long extension is for, and your 12 deep, but in this case I don't need it. Now that I have the air intake out, I just need to get at the up pipe support bracket located on the passenger side of the up pipe. You can get at that using your extension and a 14 deep. One point I'd like to make is that this car actually didn't have its heat shield installed. Normally you'd have to remove the heat shield prior to getting this bracket off, or at least the one bolt that's located down here. The heat shield has about 4 bolts down on this side. You just have to get the one bolt off that connects to this bracket, and then you can get the bracket out once you've got the 214s out. Make sure you mind the coolant hose as you're pulling the bracket off. There's the bracket. Now that we have the bracket off, we have to take the lower coolant hose. It's actually the feed hose for the turbocharger. You got to remove that, you have to remove the top part so that we can pull it back out of the way. Before you do that, I recommend that you clamp off this upper hose so that you have less coolant spill when you get the hose off. There's that. I'm just using a tension clamp. You can get it at any auto parts store or parts, tool retailer or anything like that, Sears anywhere. Once you get the tension clamp off of the coolant line, you just need to wiggle the coolant hose loose and then remove it so that it can be set back and out of the way. Be very careful not to tear or damage the coolant line. Next you'll see there's a 10mm bolt attached to a bracket that holds the stock oil feed line in place. You want to remove that bolt so that you can get at the so you can get the line out once you get the two banjos out. Once you remove that little guy, you can move on to the 10mm banjo bolt at the top of the turbo. And please understand that when I say 10mm, I'm referring to the size of the bolt itself. It's a 14mm deep socket required to take it off. So now you can see the size difference of the orifices. This is the OE bolt. This is our upgraded bolt. The other thing too is that we've got 2 holes on our banjo. This one has 1, and it's just not adequate to get, proper amount of oil into your turbo. So now you've got the bracket bolt off and the 10mm banjo at the top. Now you need to get the 12mm banjo off of the back of the cylinder head. The way I do it, because of the intakes out, I can get at it really easy here. I use a 17mm box wrench, get it over the bolt and just pop it out. Now it's loose. I can get in there with my fingers and just get it the rest of the way out. And there it is. stock oil line along with your stock banjo. You need to retain this bolt. We're going to reuse it. Your stock oil line, a lot of the failing points right here where they kind of braze the fitting to the hard line, it'll crack in some cases and create a massive oil leak all over your turbo. We've even seen fire hazard as a result of that failure. So this is the factory banjo bolt that came out of this vehicle. This is also an OE replacement bolt. You can see there's a screen in the bolt in my left hand here. If your Subaru came with that screen, we recommend to remove it. You can reuse this banjo bolt, no problem. Obviously this one did not come with a screen, but if it did, we would either clean it or remove it completely. Now that I've cleaned this bolt off, we're going to, as I said before, reuse the 12mm stock banjo bolt that came out of the backside of the cylinder head. I'll load on one of the copper washers, load it into my banjo here, and then another copper washer. As a precaution to make sure it doesn't back out, I like to put a little bit of thread locker, just a little bit of blue on there, and then you got to feed it into the port that you removed it from. Once you get the oil line banjo bolt finger tight into the back of the cylinder head, before you torque it, you need to make sure that you're clearing the casting on the back side of the block here. If you don't clock the oil line properly, it won't seat and you'll have a big oil leak. So you have to have the oil line fitting, the banjo bolt fitting, pointing downward towards the frame at approximately a 30 to 45 degree angle before you torque it. The torque spec on this 12mm bolt is 25 foot-pounds. Once that is torqued and clocked correctly, verify that your banjo fitting is not at a bad angle due to the casting. Mine looks good. At this point you can load your 10mm high flow banjo bolt with one copper washer, put it through the fitting here, get the other copper washer on the other end, and then install it into the top of the turbo. Sometimes some light twisting of the oil line will be required to properly align the threads. Once the threads are aligned, you can finger tighten the bolt here, your 10mm high flow banjo. Torque spec on this is 12 foot-pounds. Be very careful not to strip the threads going into your turbocharger. Should be good. So now that you have your upper and lower banjo bolts torqued properly and the line clocked appropriately, I'm going to put the upper part of the lower coolant feed line back onto the turbo. We recommend that you replace the stock tension clamp with a screw type clamp. We have found that when reusing the stock tension clamps, they end up leaking, causing a mess and a bunch of smoke. So we replace them every time. Now that I have the new hose clamp installed and the hose in place, reinstall the bracket, support bracket. Just got to kind of work it underneath the hose here. Take your 14mm nut and bolt that you removed earlier. Once you've verified that your coolant line is good, with the clamp is tight, you can pop your tension clamps off and relieve that hose. At this point I've got my line in, my bracket back in, my coolant hose reinstalled, so I can start putting together the intake. Now that my airbox is installed properly, I'm going to put in the last part of our intake piping. We want to make sure that your throttle cable is routed correctly over the top. As you're putting these together, always feel underneath and make sure that you're not lipping the pipe over. If you do that, you'll create a vacuum leak. I find it easier to tighten one side. You'll see there's a gap here. Tighten the one side and then pull this side together. And while you're supporting it, tighten it. Makes it a little easier to go up, pop it into place. Now that you got that last piece of the intake in, put your hood prop back in, and then your job done. That's it. Alright everyone, that was the install. Pretty quick and easy. It takes about 45 minutes. If you have any questions or if you want to order one, give us a call or email us at the shop. Thanks again.